This is Paul Davis Uncanceled, and here comes the fired up Texas lawyer himself, Paul Davis. Paul Davis.
All right. Well, technical difficulties as usual. Intro is cut short, but nobody's watching anyway, so so it doesn't really matter. But welcome back to Paul Davis Uncanceled. Hopefully we'll get at least somebody on here watching. But I guess, all right, we got 2 people watching. Thanks. Hopefully we'll get some more on. But welcome to episode 7 of Paul Davis Uncanceled. And this is where we tell inspiring stories of courageous patriots from all over the country who are fighting for our freedom in the face of vicious tyranny. And tonight, I'm very excited to have Kansas State Representative Tatum Lee on the show to talk about her fight to run for office and expose election fraud in Kansas. And, I think she's got a really compelling story as to just being a normal, everyday citizen that was fed up and just decided to run for office. And, we all know what happens when ordinary citizens try to do that and face the establishment. So she's got a pretty harrowing tale to tell tonight, as I understand it. And actually, I think right now is coming back from the courthouse. She had a hearing on her efforts to audit her election result. So we'll get an update on that and, get an idea of what, I mean, this is going on in every single state. It's crazy. No state is exempt. I mean, how did we get here to where we can't trust the election results really in any state now? But, last week while we were live streaming, the FBI, which has proven itself to be basically the American Gestapo at this point, was in the middle of conducting the most egregious and unprecedented raid in U.S. history. And 1 week later, we still have zero, and I mean zero explanation as to how this raid was in any way justified. For 4 days after the raid last week, we had a little more than radio silence out of the FBI, DOJ, and White House as to who even authorized this raid. And finally, Thursday afternoon, the coward Merrick Garland got up and gave one of the most disgraceful press conferences I've ever seen, shaking and stammering the whole time like the little weasel that he is and looking like he was about to wet himself, honestly. I've never seen anything like it. It was pathetic. It was embarrassing. And then he had the nerve to go on and act like we were the problem. We, the MAGA patriot movement people. He's all like, I will not stand by he has a much nerdier voice than that. Sorry. I will not stand by while the integrity of the FBI is questioned. And just all this garbage about how they're working every day to protect Americans from terrorists and violent criminals. What a load of crap. Give me a freaking break. They're the terrorists, the FBI. I mean, Merrick Garland, if you don't like people questioning the integrity of the FBI, then why don't you and your lackey Chris Wray stop using the FBI and DOJ as your personal Gestapo to target your political enemies? How about that? We all know you're still butthurt about how the Republicans blocked you from being on the Supreme Court, and thank God they did, because you, sir, are a disgrace. We all know what you're doing. This is not law enforcement. This is third world banana republic BS. It's been a whole week, and you have provided zero justification for raiding the home of a former president and future presidential candidate. We all know he's going to run. And if this was a legally executed warrant, if you provided the judge with all the relevant facts, then let's see the affidavit for this warrant. Let's see the receipts. To date, you have not provided the receipts as to how this was a legally executed warrant. Oh, yeah, the judge signed off on it. Well, what did you tell the judge? What did he have in front of you? We still haven't seen that affidavit, and we have no idea if this is legit. And you know what? The fact that we still haven't seen it, I think, says everything. So this is going to go down in history as just one of the most outrageous, abuses of power in U.S. history. And, we haven't seen the affidavit, Merrick Garland. We know why, because you and the FBI, whoever did this affidavit, lied. You didn't tell the truth to the judge about how Trump had been cooperating with the FBI in this investigation. What need did you have to raid President Trump's house when he had been voluntarily allowing FBI agents to come in, see whatever they want, have whatever they wanted? I mean, he literally said that the last time that they were there. All of this is on video surveillance. I mean, none of this was legal. And we're going to see that. You're going to have to release this affidavit at some point, and we're going to see how full of crap you are. And, then On top of that, you went to the Washington Post and you leaked some BS story about how the FBI had to raid Trump's home because he had stolen nuclear codes. Are you freaking kidding me? Do you really expect us to believe that? Like, how dumb do you think we are? Let's just assume for 1 second that ridiculous story is true, which it definitely is not. What the hell is Trump going to do with nuclear codes? What, you think he's going to launch nuclear missiles from Mar-a-Lago? How exactly is he going to do that? Like, he's going to call up Lloyd Austin and Mark Milley and be like, hey guys, I got the nuclear codes. Can you go ahead and launch some nukes into China for me? I mean, so even if your cockamamie BS story is true, how would that justify a raid? What national security emergency was there to justify this raid? Did you even ask him for the codes? And, the only reason they did this, is because they know Trump's going to destroy whatever Democrat candidate tries to run in 2024. It's not even going to be close. Just like the Democrat Party is going to get destroyed in November in the midterm. So this is the best you can come up with to try to stop him. Bravo. Slow clap for you. Trying to paint some cloud around Trump like he's a criminal. You are the criminal, Merrick Garland. You are the criminal, Christopher Wray. You and your demented boss, Joe Biden. And by the way, if Joe Biden really didn't know about this raid, then why hasn't he fired Merrick Garland and Chris Wray for usurping his authority to authorize the most controversial raid in U.S. history? It's because he wanted this to happen too. But guess what? You're all going to get impeached. We're going to own you at the ballot box. And then when the Republicans take back the House and Senate, you, Joe, and Chris Wray will be impeached. We will have committees investigating the corruption and weaponization of the national security state against political opponents. The FBI is going to get defunded and gutted when Trump takes back the White House and when the Republicans take back Congress. And that's what's going to happen. There's nothing you can do about it. But let me tell you, before I bring Tatum Lee on real quick, let me tell you what this was really about. So the raid on Mar-a-Lago had two purposes. Neither of them were legitimate. First, they want to disqualify Trump from running in 2024. Good luck with that. He's the most investigated man in U.S. history, and they still have not 4 years of investigations, really 5 years of investigations, now 6, and they haven't found a single shred of evidence to use against him on anything. So the Espionage Act, which they're trying to say that that's what this raid was about, has a provision that if you're convicted under a certain provisions of the act, you're prohibited from ever holding public office. So that's what they're hoping for. That's their holy grail, to get Trump on some crime that's going to prevent him from running for office. But everyone sees through this plan. The Supreme Court is not going to sit back and let you circumvent the qualifications for presidential candidates, which are in the Constitution. With this obviously motivated political witch hunt. So the second purpose of the raid was to provoke the MAGA movement to cause outrage. The talking points are now all over the media that we're a bunch of domestic terrorists because we want the FBI disbanded and dissolved. Then, conveniently, only hours before Merrick Garland's press conference that took him 4 days to prepare for, there's an attack on an FBI office. How convenient. I mean, you couldn't really plan for better timing, could you? You could not plan for better timing. But we know the FBI would never plan anything like that. I mean, it's not like they planned a kidnapping of Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer so they could pin it on the Patriots. Oh, wait, yeah, they totally did that. So it's obvious what they're doing. They're fishing for an excuse to arrest patriots. They're trying to provoke another January 6th to paint us as domestic terrorists because they want to round us all up and lock us up. Prepare for more false flags from the FBI, but keep a cool head. Don't erupt. Don't do anything stupid. Don't say anything stupid online. Don't make threats of violence online. That's what they want you to do. That's exactly what they want you to do. So don't walk into their trap. So we will take back our country at the ballot box this November. We have patriots fighting for election integrity every day. We're not going to let them steal another election. We're going to overwhelm them at the ballot box. Even if they try to steal it, we're going to overwhelm them on election day, on game day. And one person fighting for election integrity is Tatum Lee in Kansas, which I'm very excited to have on the show tonight. I'm happy to welcome Tatum to the show. Thank you, Tatum, for coming on. Can you hear me?
Hello, how are you? Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
I can. So are you, I understand you're driving back from the courthouse as we speak. Is that right?
I am driving back from the courthouse as we speak. I'm just going to tell you, I am whooped. This whole fighting for liberty, I mean, we're not storming the beaches of Normandy today, so praise Jesus for that, and I have to keep that in perspective. But I tell you what, our liberty is under attack in every way, and I just, these machines, we need to be frickin' voting like the Amish. one paper ballots. First of all, the machines just need to go. I mean, it is ridiculous that we have gotten so lazy as a society that we cannot spend a few hours, bring some folks in, and hand count the ballots so that we know we're not operating under a shadow government. I mean,
Absolutely.
it's stunning to me. And I know we weren't going to start here. I know that we had talked about, which we can talk about 2 years ago when I first got elected. But
Yeah.
I am stunned at how this process has gotten so convoluted to where, you almost, I've asked, so our primary was August the 2nd. And I asked for a recount because there were several nefarious things that had come my way. Like, hey, things aren't adding up, to the point where I even had a deputy clerk in one of my counties call and say, hey, I feel like maybe some things weren't right in your race. Well, when you have a deputy clerk calling you saying, hey, I feel like something is off, that's kind of strange. The other thing, I live in a very rural area, small communities, and out of 105 counties, 3 of my counties were the very last counties to get their ballots in at 1:30 in the morning. I mean, these are not large counties. I mean, that's odd. Even later than Johnson County, which is, Kansas City. And then I lost my race, according to the numbers, by the same margin that valued them both failed as well. So 59 to 41%. So, could that be just a coincidence? Absolutely. But could it be an algorithm? I mean, I've sat on the elections committee for the last 2 years in Kansas. I've seen the fraud. I've seen the data, which produces the mistrust that we've had fraud in Kansas. And, it just sucks that you feel like you have to say to these clerks, hey, I'm not against you. This isn't about you. This happens at a much higher level than these county clerks, that are our neighbors and our friends and this is deep state happening on both sides of the aisle. Republicans, Democrats, all those suckers are deep state. I'm sorry, they are. And all eyes were watching Kansas last week, or August 2nd, I guess. I got COVID right after the election, so it took me out a few days, so I'm off a few days. But, Kansas had the first ballot initiative, the first vote.
Oh, we lost your audio, Tatum. Can we hear you
now?
Or,
yeah.
There we go. We got you back.
Sorry,
let me ask you this though before you go on. So you mentioned, are you saying that you lost your race by the same margin as there were some other candidates in this race that lost by the exact same margin you did? Is that what you said?
I said that I lost my race by the same exact margin as Value Them Both failed, which is the Value Them Both was the constitutional amendment that was the very first one in the state of in the country to be on a ballot since Roe v. Wade was overturned.
Oh, okay.
So,
Gotcha. Yeah.
So when you have Chuck Schumer and all of the muckety mucks, let's just call them what they are. They're all deep state. When they're all getting on all these national television studio, the networks, and talking about how all eyes are on Kansas, and as Kansas goes, so goes the rest of the country. You tell me, after what we've seen in 2020 with Trump, that they weren't going to try to screw with that race? Of course they are. Of course they're going to try to screw with Value Them Both. It had too big of national implications. That's just my opinion. And so, anyway, today was Friday, actually, was the last day for us at 5:00 to submit recounts according to Kansas statute. And, millions were spent in Kansas to get Value Them Both passed. And, honestly, Value Them Both wasn't even the best amendment for life. There was one that would have it's called the Personhood Amendment, and completely gotten rid of abortion in Kansas. But the Republicans in Kansas, which of course I am one, but there's Republicans and patriots, right? And we have a lot of lack of courage in Kansas. And the Republicans did not have the courage to just step up and get rid of abortion. So instead, they did this value them both, which actually would just put the word abortion in the Kansas Constitution, so the legislature could legislate around abortion. So was it value them both the best? No. But would it save some babies? And do I support that? Absolutely. But anyway, so millions went in to get this passed in Kansas, and then it failed, and there was no remedy for a recount. And so what ended up happening on last Friday is you just have a bunch of election integrity patriots in Kansas who have seen the fraud since 2020, and they got mad and they started crowdfunding for the last 48 hours. I think they've raised over $50,000 right now. Then they had somebody come in today with like $106,000 to say, no, if we cannot do a recount, hand recount, no machine ballots, no machine ballot images, the actual ballots, we want to hand recount. If we can't do the whole state, okay, but we're going to do a sampling of the state. And I'm sure as heck proud of them, because you just have that feeling that we already had an instance in Cherokee
hold on.
County, Kansas. It was on MSNBC and Gateway Pundit. Yeah.
Yeah. What was that? Go ahead.
We had an instance where just in this last week, when they went in to do one of their mandatory 1% audits, that the USB stick that they put in the tabulator that's supposed to then match up with the ballots actually was flipping votes. And a county commissioner race in Kansas just this last week was flipped because of those USB ballots, or that USB stick that had flipped the votes in the machine and the ballots. So we've already had an instance where there was fraud in Kansas. So everybody's a little bit on edge. We'll just say nobody trusts the machines. That's the bottom line.
So how does that work with how did the thumb drive flip ballots?
Well, so I did not know how that worked either. So here's apparently what happens. These different voting companies, I don't know if it was ES&S. I think that I had heard it was ES&S. They load on these USB ports how the ballot is going to be laid out. When somebody sees the ballot, here's how the candidates, are set up, the page set up, for instance. And so then they put this USB ballot or USB stick in the tabulator machine, and then when the ballot is fed through that machine, then the machine sends it through its template and counts it. That's how it counts, based on what's been pre-programmed on that USB stick. The problem is nobody freaking knows what's on those USB sticks, right? They're coming from the voting companies, which are not the local county clerks or any of their staff. And so they're just blindly trusting that what's on that USB stick is correct data. And when they audited by a hand recount those ballots, they figured out that machine was flipping the votes and giving one, votes to the other candidate, and it literally flipped the entire county commissioner race. Well, wow. That's scary as the dickens. So, when they say, well, value, because I've been, trying to help get this recount then for value them both, and they're like, gosh, we lost by over 100,000 votes in Kansas. Like, why would you even press for a recount? Well, if you've got machines that are tabulators that are flipping votes because maybe they're programmed wrong, 100,000 votes is not a lot of votes to make up. And here's the thing: the question for me becomes, how many votes that get flipped is enough for it to be fraud enough?
Right? Yeah. I mean,
yeah.
There shouldn't be any. I mean, there shouldn't be. It's like, you hear that the media say, oh, well, okay, first, no such thing as election fraud. No evidence of election fraud whatsoever. This was the most secure election in history, going back to 2020. Then it was, okay, there might be some election fraud, but it wasn't enough to overturn the election. Well, it's like, how do you even know that? How do you know that? And I mean, we should have zero fraud in our elections, and it's just, you get in a situation where we have mail-in ballots that are not, they're not tagged to any specific person. They're just unsolicited. They're mailed out, and then people can bring as many as they want and drop them in a drop box. I mean, I'm not necessarily describing Kansas's system, but we do see that system in several other states, Georgia, and a few others. But it's like, how would you even know if there was election fraud with that kind of system? You can't even discover it because you can't tag that ballot to a specific person. So you don't even know if that was a real person or not. And then, is that a problem? Isn't that a problem? But if you even ask that question, you're demonized. So let's back up though. What made you decide to run for office?
My grandpa was in a nursing home and COVID hit, and they wouldn't let me see him. And what we saw was, in my opinion, it will go down in history as one of the greatest human atrocities in our history. When we allow old people to die without their families, and we do it all in the name of compassionate care, and all in the name of being a good neighbor. And no, we let old people die without their families, and they would have much rather died of COVID than loneliness, which is what was happening. And so I was being disenfranchised from seeing him and him me, and I was stunned that it was such an egregious malfeasance of our constitutional rights. He's an 84-year-old man who lived his whole life building this small community, and now at the end of his life, he's being denied life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and being treated literally like a criminal. He was put behind plexiglass boxes. You couldn't see your family or touch them, that's what we do to animals and criminals, is put them in boxes. And so nobody would help me. I called the Secretary of State's, the Attorney General's office, and which, by the way, is Derek Schmidt, who's running for governor in Kansas right now. And I called his office, and I was just a girl. Remember, I was just a granddaughter, and I said, "Hey, what is the Attorney General going to do to file a suit on behalf of these folks that are being denied their constitutional liberty?" And the woman literally said to me, "Ma'am, our office represents the government, not the people."
Whoa.
I was stunned. I said, "I'm sorry?" She's like, "We don't file cases on behalf of the people. We file cases on behalf of the government." And I said, "Well, with all due respect, we the people are the government. And so his fiduciary job is to the people of Kansas and protecting their constitutional rights." And so I ended up calling back a couple weeks later, again, out of desperation, got the same thing. And I know that story. I know that's a real story. It happened to others, because I've said this, I've repeated that many times in the last 2 years, and other families were told the same. So you know how the Lord works. I contacted my state rep, and I was going to have him help me. And he was in poor health and ended up passing away in a few-week period of time that I was trying to reach him. And so I ended up running in a special election for his seat. And wow. So I won in a special election, 2 special elections, actually. And for the last 2 years, I was in Topeka, just literally fighting my guts out. And man, I tell you, it was one of the grossest experiences of my life. I am just so stunned at how weak-minded so many of these politicians are. All they care about is an election. They don't care about the next generation. They just care about staying in office. And so I'm coming up to Topeka, and I'm like, man, praise the Lord. We're in a Republican supermajority. We have the House and we have the Senate. And I thought I was going to find my people. I'm going to tell you right now, it was sorry. And nobody wanted to push back against the COVID narrative, right? Because there was so much money involved, and everybody was getting handouts from the government, and nobody wanted to Well, let me just tell you, I think I was
Wait, hold on, back up
Yeah.
a few things. So
Yeah.
how long did you have between the time that you decided to run and the actual special election, and how did you, as just a regular citizen, I mean, I assume you had no previous political experience, how did you even figure out how to do that? And you won the election. Tell us about that.
Well, it was an Esther moment. You know, when the Lord puts something in front of you, you just take the step and you move forward and you trust Holy Spirit. And that's what I did. And I had met our state senator during her election. So that would have been in August. And I had called her up. And so my previous life was I worked at the national level on cattle issues and market profitability. And, you know, that's a whole nother podcast where we talk about control the people, control the food, control the people.
Oh, yeah.
So we're farmers and ranchers, and that's what I was doing. And so, you know, farmers and ranchers in Kansas, all over the country, are going broke. And, you know, our food supply is a national security issue. And so I was working on those issues. And honestly, I was so focused at the national level, and I'm embarrassed to tell you this, but I thought somebody else was taking care of what was going on at the state level. And so he was a Republican, our state rep, and so I didn't really think much about it until I needed him, right? Until I needed his help. And I'm going to pull in here so that I can focus and think. I just felt like, you know, somebody smarter than me has this taken care of. And what ended up happening is when this seat opened up, I called our state senator, who I had been like, hey, I need your help with my grandpa. And she said, Tatum, she goes, we need your voice in Topeka. And that's when I was like, okay, Lord, this is of you. And you know, I beat out a guy who'd been there, I think 2 or 3 times before in that special election. I mean, it wasn't just an appointed thing. I mean, it was an election with precinct people. I tell you, I'll put that plug in. If you're not a precinct person, people need that. Those are important, very important jobs. We need to make sure that we have patriots in office at every single level, including the precinct level, our sheriffs, our county commissioners, every level. We need to have patriots, because when crap hits the fan, we're going to have to start. That's when the patriots are going to have to step up. And I just thought somebody else had taken care of it. And so I ran in that seat and I went to Topeka, and I didn't know what I was doing, but it wasn't about not knowing what I was doing. It was just about, you know, politics isn't hard. It's just doing the right thing because it's the right thing. That's it. And when our constitutional sovereignty is being infringed, you push back. You don't roll over. And I was just stunned. I think there was only 6 of us in the House. There's 125 reps in the House. There was maybe 6 of us who wouldn't wear a mask the whole time. You know, and people would look at us and sneer. And I'm like, this is freaking Kansas. Like, you know, it's not California. And people lost their minds during COVID because it was all about, you know, control. And my motto became this: my liberty does not stop where your fear begins. So if you want to wear a mask and not go to your committees, or go to the House floor, or not do any of those things, then you get to do that. You get to do what's best for you, and I get to do what's best for me. And so what ended up evolving over 2 years is that we had this massive medical freedom battle, right? So you have old people in nursing homes. That was the first one. And in conjunction with that, we have doctors prescribing ivermectin, and the pharmacists were refusing to fill it. And we have, you know, then the vaccine mandates. I mean, last fall, I think it was November, when I was on Newsmax talking about, I started a 10th Amendment caucus with legislators all across the country saying, you know, the federal government is so freaking out of control. Like, we will just get together at the state level, some patriot legislators, which there are just so few of us, and we're just going to start pushing back. And so there was over 200 of us who signed a letter and basically said to Joe Biden, you need to cease and desist. You don't have the right to tell us in our states what we can do. And so
that's so true. I just want to say, you know, a lot of people just have it backwards. They think that Constitution was set up to have this strong federal government. Whatever the federal government says goes, and it's the exact opposite. The states are supposed to have the power under the Constitution, and the federal government has very limited powers. Everything else is reserved to the states. So you're absolutely on the right track there.
And I think that I'm so disappointed that so few legislators, they get it. And those of us that do get it, oh my gosh, Tatum, you're a radical. And I chuckled now, and it's a badge of honor. I'm like, you know what? If standing up for the Constitution is radical, sign me up. And so it was
Absolutely.
2 years of fighting those and election integrity. I sat on elections, which was totally the Lord, because in sitting on elections, I got to know Dr. Frank very well, who works with Mike Lindell, and we've become friends. And he was, able to explain some of those things, and I was privy to see some different data. And I'm like, holy smokes! I mean, yes, there was fraud. Even our own Kansas Legislative Research Department said in 2020, because our machines hadn't been certified up to HAVA standards, that there was some vulnerability in our elections. Legislators don't ever read any of those books, those research studies that come out. I mean, these and so
wait, at the time of your election, the machines were not certified to the HAVA's, the Help America Vote Act standards. How can they even legitimate? I mean, I don't think you can have an election, at least not for federal office, if your machines aren't certified to HAVA standards, right?
Well, they're still not. And as a matter of fact, if you go to my Facebook, you will see just a couple of days ago, a patriot citizen, his name's Thad Snyder, lives in Kansas City. I'm telling you, the Lord has put a group of Kansas patriots together. They've started this group called the Kansas Reckoning, and they continue to do election integrity events and have Seth Keshel come in, and Dr. Frank and different folks come in, and they have uncovered that none of the machines in Kansas have been certified since 2015. Wow. Which is, again, against federal and state statute. And quite
well, and that same thing that happened not just in Kansas, where Kansas wasn't a swing state in this last election, but like you look at like Michigan, they had Microsoft SQL loaded on those machines, which is a backdoor for hackers, and you're not allowed to do that. And I mean, there were all sorts of just instances of these machines not being certified to have a standard. So it's like, we can't have a legitimate election if the machines aren't even calibrated correctly under the standards.
It's so disgusting. And I'm a pretty trusting gal. Like, I want to believe the best in people, and I love our country so much, and I'm embarrassed to tell you that I have seen the fraud in 2020, and you go, man, that was totally stolen from Trump, and yet was naive enough to feel like, and let me be on the record, if I lost my election on August the 2nd, fair and square, then I lost my election. It's not about losing for me. I did everything the Lord called me to do. But if it was cheated because of fraud, and I had lost over two or 300 votes within the first couple hours of the election, you don't lose votes. And that came out on the Edison data. That's really the main reason that I'm asking for these hand recounts. If I lost because of fraud, that's the problem. But here's the thing that has struck me this week. Are we living, and then, we see what happened with Trump, and I heard you talking about that while I was in the backstage waiting to come on. We're living in a freaking shadow government, where they can install people at will, change elections at will, and we know the software exists. I mean, shoot fire, we probably helped design it for some of these third world countries like Venezuela. Are we living in this smoke screens that Biden and all the deep state is in charge, and things just shit just hasn't hit the fan yet? Sorry, I probably shouldn't have, but I mean,
you can cuss on this show. It's okay.
Are we living?
We have cuss word in the intro, so.
Are we living in such a time where we're like, wait a minute, is any of it real? Like, I
Yeah.
would never have been the girl that said I wouldn't trust an election until it happens to you.
Mm-hmm.
Until you see it happen and you're like, oh my stars, these machines. And again, it's not the county clerks. This happens at such a high level. And the kicker is, it's not, I mean, the Democrats are communists at this point. But it's not even about the Democrats. There's just as many, if not worse. I mean, the last 2 years of my life in Topeka, total rhino. It's the rhinos that suck. The rhinos are who is destroying America because they've watered down the truth, right? I mean, you may not like me, but you're always going to know where I stand. But it's these rhinos that act like they're like my opponent, for instance, who voted for Medicaid expansion, which is the killing of, expanding Obamacare, funding abortions, March 22nd of this year. But, he's a farmer and he's a good old boy and he's a conservative because he tells you he is. Those are the politicians that make me mad. Because
Right. You
those are
mentioned,
they're not
sorry,
honest.
yeah, they're not. Yeah, exactly. I mean, you mentioned earlier when you were in the House of Representatives, you saw people were getting handouts. You said something like they're getting handouts from or kickbacks, with regard to the medical tyranny going on in our hospitals. What did you mean by that?
Well, I don't know personally the kickbacks. I don't have firsthand knowledge of personal kickbacks that were happening, but I sure as heck know that every single legislator that votes for all those medical, for instance, to give hospitals more immunity, which was a bill that we had this year, absolutely not going to give hospitals more immunity during COVID when there was such malfeasance already happening. I know that you and Amy have done some of those, had some cases where literally people were dying in hospitals and the hospital was the responsible one. And we had the Kansas legislature with the hospital society or the medical society and the hospital association writing big checks to legislators in their elections who, don't vote for that bill. I mean, it's just not honest. It's not on the side of liberty. It's not on the side of the people. It's you scratch my back and I'll scratch yours. And that's the problem. That's what I saw in Topeka is it was all about making sure you're doing what you had to stay elected. It wasn't about doing what the people needed. It was about, and it's all a big secret, which is why, of course, they didn't like me because I went to my social media for 2 years. I was so desperate when I got up there and I was so disgusted that I was like, holy smokes. If people found out what I just found out, they'd be just as pissed off as me. And I needed help. So I just went to my social media and I just started outing stuff. Like, here's what's going on. Here's this game that's played. Here's this vote that happened. Here's what the Speaker of the House did today. As for instance, here's just a flavor of how gross the leadership is in the Kansas State House. The majority leader, Dan Hawkins, who probably, unless somebody beats him, will be the Speaker of the House this next year, said to me last year, or 2 years ago when I'd first come in, we were at a dinner and he goes, Tatum, the sooner you learn that the Speaker of the House is God and the committee chairs control everything and they're the little gods, you'll get along just fine up here.
Wow. That's disturbing. That's so disturbing.
But that is who these politicians think they are. Yeah. And so when a normal person comes in, who I don't really give a flip who they think they are, I mean, I'm going to do the right thing. And I started trying to expose truth and expose the fight for what it is, because the people, when the only time in Kansas in the last 2 years that I saw something good happen is when Biden's vaccine mandates were coming down the pike, and we were not going to be in session until January. This was last fall, and all folks are contacting me like crazy because a lot of other politicians, they're not very accessible. Politicians don't make themselves accessible. I'm just a person. Like, I was just a granddaughter who was desperate myself. So I'll help anybody, right? I mean,
Mm-hmm,
I'm not anyone except for just who God's called me to be. So I started messaging our leadership. I'm like, hey, we got to go to a special session. We got to get back and pass a law to protect people according to the 10th Amendment against this federal tyranny that's coming,
mm-hmm.
that's going to completely wipe out our jobs. People are going to have to, they're going to quit their jobs because they're not going to get the jab. And the leadership said, oh, Tatum, just pre-file legislation, wait till January. Well, people would have lost their jobs before then. And so what ended up happening is there was so much public outcry that there was a 2-day public hearing in Topeka. The people showed up, and I'm telling you what, those representatives, the president of the Senate was on that committee. There were several, and they got their asses handed to them, and it was
Nice.
glory. And the people were like, you do what we want you to do, or your ass is gone. Like, we are done with you. And it scared them. I should back up. There was 19 of us. According to Kansas statute, there's 2 ways to go back to a special session. The governor could call us back, which she's a communist. She's not going to call us back. She wasn't going to. Or we could.
Is she a Republican or Democrat?
Oh, total Democrat. Laura Kelly, who, by the way, just found out recently, meets weekly with former Governor Sebelius, which, of course, was in Obama's, what do they call her? The something death. I don't know. Like, she's way wicked, bad. Anyway, so we knew Kelly wasn't going to call us back. So we put out, 5 of us, a letter to our colleagues, 165, and we said, hey, we got to get back to special session. And the Republican leadership put out these scare tactics. Oh, no, it'll be too expensive. We can't go back to a special session. And only 19 legislators in the state of Kansas out of 165 said, we're not following party lines. We're going to do what the people want. We're going to go back to Topeka to protect our people. And so after the public hearing, of course, that's not 2/3 of the majority. So that failed. Well, then after the public outcry and these politicians saw, oh my stars, we might get unseated, they decided, well, maybe a special session is a good idea. So they called us back, and they wouldn't pass a bill to ban mandates, but they passed a bill to allow religious exemptions. So, which, whatever, saved people's jobs. So, you just shouldn't have to fight your own stinking party so hard to have liberty. Like,
right.
It's the Republican GOP establishment in the state of Kansas, even now, that we're having to fight, because there is a senator who is phenomenal. His name is Senator Dennis Pyle. Very conservative, godly man. Homeschooled his kids. He and his wife, they have 6 daughters. He's been a senator for 20-some years. Conservative to the nines. And he just left the Republican Party so he could run against the presumed Republican, well, he is the nominee now, Derek Schmidt, who's our Attorney General, who has a worse voting record on life than our liberal governor, Laura Kelly, right?
Wow.
But because Derek Schmidt's the Republican, all these GOP Republicans want to get behind him. And what ended up happening is the GOP literally a few weeks ago sent out a loyalty oath to GOP committee members saying, because he dropped out of the party and became an independent, and then he had to have 5,000 signatures to get on the ballot to run in November. And basically they were threatened, if you in any way support this guy, you will lose your voting privileges through the Republican Party.
Wow. That's crazy.
Isn't that nuts?
Yeah, I mean, it's just, the problem you're describing, it's just all the politicians, they don't care what the people think. They care what their donors think. They serve the donor class. They don't serve the people. And once they get that job, it's like, they want to keep it, it's the best job they've ever had. They get, all of a sudden like in Washington, you can get really lucrative jobs for your family, and then they can give you 10%, like Joe Biden did 10% for the big guy. We know how this works, and that's what they're concerned about. They're not concerned about doing something great for the people. They're concerned about, like you said, keeping their position, taking all this money from the donor class and doing what they want, not what the people who elected them want them to do. But let's change gears. So so in this election, what specifically did you see that made you think that there was some kind of fraud in this election? Like you mentioned a county clerk calling you. Like what? Tell us about that. What did she see, or he or she see?
Right. Well, so the night of the election, my votes dropped significant. It was like 70-20, and then all of a sudden, like percentage wise, then all of a sudden I think I lost like 500 votes or something, and then it was 200 votes. Well, you don't lose votes in an election, right? You just keep climbing votes.
Right.
And so that was the first big red flag. And then, and just different things, like that county clerk, the county clerk calling me the next day, or that deputy, and just saying, have you thought about maybe asking for a recount? And that percentage split between my loss and value them both, again, I have no problem losing. I've won a lot in my life, and I've lost a lot in my life. It's not about losing if I lose fairly, right? Mm-hmm. And so is that a coincidence that I lost by the same percentage split as value them both? Or is that an algorithm? And so I ended up having just a barrage of people messaging me, and I actually sent it to there's several graphs that have been done on my election data that night, and you can see where the switch happened, and then there was a perfect parallel. And so, yeah. And so you just think, man, it was a 21. Well, here's the other kicker. And so
wait, hold on. Like you said the switch and then a parallel, kind of like we saw with Trump on election night, where it went up and then it just, wow, that's crazy.
Paralleled. It is.
Did you get any explanation for how it's possible that one can lose votes on election night? They just put them in the wrong column, I guess. Just
recently, but I've not heard it from the Secretary of State's office or this particular clerk. I heard that there could have been a clerical error, and maybe, right? I mean, people make mistakes. I make mistakes.
Aren't the computers? But isn't that why we have the computers? So there's no clerical errors. The computers are supposed to be perfect, right?
Well, maybe again, data entry. If she's typing it in and she typed the numbers in, and maybe that's the case. And if so, I just wish they'd come out and say, hey, by the way, if you want to know why you had a massive dump in votes, it's because this was a clerical error. That would have gone a long way to try to help alleviate some concern. But then there were other things, like, again, out of 105 counties, why do my 3 little counties, I think there it is. There's some graphs you'll see here in a little bit where you'll see the drop, and then the switch, and then you'll see the parallel.
Oh, wow. Look at that.
Well, and and if that slide you just passed, there was you can see where I was up like 70-20. Yeah. And then all of a sudden it just dropped. And then there's the parallel. So there's certainly enough questions, and I actually had somebody call me and say, hey, Tatum, have you thought about doing a hand recount? And based on what I've seen in the last, there it is. Based on what I've seen the last 2 years, I know that those machines can have fraud. And I know that, the Speaker of the House, it was leaked in a conference call that he was going to spend $100,000 against me in this race. Now, mind you, I represent more cattle than people, okay? Like, I am just a small town girl from the middle of nowhere. But the Lord has given me a great platform to just speak and expose truth. And the swamp hates the truth, and they super hate exposure. So they came after me. Topeka came after me with everything. I mean, mailers and the radio ads. And I mean, there were pictures of me with Kamala Harris, Joe Biden, and Nancy Pelosi. Now, I'm like to the right of right, but they're having to make up crap because they were so desperate. They were like, she cannot get back to Topeka. And so, when I had another rep call me and say, hey, I've seen these charts. He said, I know your race is brutal. He said, that's politics. He goes, but fraud, if there was fraud in your race, he goes, I'll pay for your recount. And, it was just a kind gesture for him to say, in the state of Kansas, we cannot, politics might be ugly, but it has to stay honest, at least as honest as it can be. And, for this recount week, because everything has to be done statutorily by Wednesday, this isn't about me, Paul. This is just about truth. People have to trust their elections. If we don't have free and fair elections, we do not have a republic.
Absolutely. Yeah. So what's the latest? What did you have to do to challenge this? What does that look like, and where are you at right now?
So today was the first day of the challenge. On Friday, last week, I had to submit a letter to the Secretary of State saying that I wanted a hand recount, and then you have to put up the bond. And the bond that comes from the Secretary of State. Each county gets to decide how much they're going to charge for the hand recount. And then they have till Wednesday of this week to be able to get it all done. In Kansas, we actually have a treasurer's race that's so close that actually triggered, it's within like 1%. It actually triggered an automatic recount. And I think it was last Saturday in Kansas City in Johnson County, when they were doing that race, they were actually looking at ballot images instead, which I have heard can be manipulated. And so even in these hand recounts, it didn't happen to me today. I think I had 3 counties recount today. And I'm hypersensitive now about these ballot images, but in Kansas City, it did happen. And that they used the ballot images instead of the actual ballots themselves that came out of the machine. And so, I don't know. I'm probably a little too raw. I should have told Amy I needed a couple days for us before we had this podcast. My heart is raw, I think, because it just feels there's no reason we need to be conducting the most precious piece of our liberty, which is our elections. We did not.
Oh, we lost your audio. Hey, can you hear me? There you go. We got you back.
Yeah.
All right, good.
Yeah, sorry about that. I got a phone call. So there's just no reason for these machines. We do not need to be trusting our machines or trusting our elections to machines.
Yeah.
Why? Why have we, are we that lazy that we can't, shoot fire, hire another 25 people. But we do not need to be trusting these machines. It's hurt my heart because, again, I called another state rep friend of mine today, and he's been saying to me, Tatum, crap's coming down the fan. Like, it's getting bad. It's going to be getting bad. And I want to be more of an optimist than that. But this week I said, are we really living, like, I had to ask myself the hard question, because I live in the middle of nowhere. It's very rural. It's very Pollyanna. It's very safe. Are we living, Paul, in an installed government? That's the question. And that sounds nuts. It sounds nuts.
Yeah.
But when we see what happened this week with Trump, or last week, when we see that at will they can change a county commissioner's race in the middle of nowhere, Kansas, with a USB stick that they put inside their tabulator, and it literally flipped a race, just flipped it. And if that one race that I think they audit like 1% of their races, and it just so happened that they audited that race. If that race would not have been audited, that subverts the will of the people. What is that worth to us?
It should be everything.
It's worth a little extra manpower the night of election night, I'd say.
Absolutely. That's why I went to January 6th, is because I just am like, this is the end of our country if Joe Biden gets installed in the White House, because he obviously did not win the election, or at least at that point, it looked very strongly like he did, or there was something very wrong. And we can't just go on with our lives like, oh, nothing to see. Let's not even take a look at this. But that's what the whole political class and the media wanted us to do. Just move on. Just, nothing to see here. It's okay. It's like,
yep.
no, that's a big deal. If you cannot trust the results of your election, if you have an installed government, I mean, we're no better than communist China, And that's why I went.
Or Venezuela, or, I mean, are we just waiting right now for, they're coming after our food. They're coming after us in every single way. I mean, I do a lot on private property rights, for instance. Biden has, it's called 30 by 30. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but literally the federal government by 2030 wants to take and bring into the federal fold 30% more of all of our waters and lands in the U.S. Well, when you start taking away private lands from those who produce the food, you're an idiot. Because, first of all, the federal government has no authority, according to the Constitution. They have very limited authority of what they can actually own and what they can't. Right. It's very spelled out, right? And so they're coming after our food source. They're coming after our elections. They're coming after, shoot fire. I'm sorry, but these vaccines, we're going to have a whole lot of people that are going to be killing over because of these vaccines. We're
already seeing it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And people are not going to be able to have kids, Yeah. You're seeing the fertility rate plummet, and you're seeing lots of miscarriages. And that's, now the documents have been disclosed from the Pfizer trials. It turns out 83% of the women that received the vaccine while they were pregnant, the ones that they actually tracked the results, we don't know the results of a lot of them. And I wonder why that is. 83% of them miscarried. Yeah. And now we're seeing miscarriages pop up, trend all over the world.
Well, and then we haven't even talked about radical Islam. Let's just talk about that, because where I live, we have a lot of meat packing plants. And we have mass illegal immigration coming up from the southern border. Obviously, as you know, you're in Texas, right? So we have this mass illegal I would say an invasion. It's not even immigration. It's a freaking invasion.
It is.
In Kansas, with all these packing plants, they continue to drop all these different ethnic cultures in the middle of nowhere. Why? In my opinion, this is an absolute Trojan horse. In the middle of, of beef country, wheat country. All these farmers and ranchers, it's, in my opinion, it's only a matter of time. First of all, radical Islam, they hate us. We're the infidels. They want to kill us. We're idiots if we don't go, hey, wait a minute. These are not our friends. They're not our friends. And when you're bringing them in to the middle of America under the auspice of, hey, we're going to bring them there to work, and they literally just drop them off, it's changing the fabric of everything about this part of the country. And, there's a group called Understanding the Threat, and they talk.
I'm familiar with them.
Amazing. And they talk about the threat of radical Islam. And, I'm sorry, but I still think that that's the shadow government that Obama is perpetuating. This might get a little too much for your show, so just tell me where.
No, it's not. No, you're right. Understanding the threat does a great job of exposing. The threat is this unholy alliance between radical Marxists and communists. Same thing, and radical Islam, because they both, both of those groups hate America because we stand for freedom, and they want their, either totalitarian government or their, Islamic caliphate. And so they're going to they have allied against the United States. And then once they get us out of the way, then they'll fight amongst each other to, see who rules the world. But it's just, you're absolutely right.
Which I think was Obama's role.
Yeah.
The fact of the matter was, is he was trying to destroy us from the inside with this Marxist, socialist, communist agenda, which is
Still is.
absolutely still, that's right. It's still the agenda. And I guess my prayer, so I'm not without hope. I know that we're coming up probably here on an hour, and I do want to say this. I believe that the Lord is not done yet with the United States.
Same.
I believe that there is a revival that's coming. I believe there's a revival that's coming, and the Lord is using a remnant all across the country. Just like I met, your friend Amy, who's now my friend as well. I never would have met her except for the Lord. And there have been many prophetic words specifically over Kansas that Chuck Pierce and Dutch Sheets, and there's many modern day men of God that have spoken truth about what is going to happen I'm not saying it's going to be easy, but in the days to come, that I do believe that there is revival that's coming. People need Jesus. That would save a lot of what we're going through right now is, people need the Lord. And I believe that Kansas is pivotal in that. I think that's why there's been such warfare over my state, even about this abortion amendment, because there is nothing more sacred to the Father than a baby, right? Than
Yes.
life. Why would that value them both? But which is why I feel so passionately about the fact that I do believe there was fraud, because the whole country was watching Kansas.
Mm-hmm.
And the word says that out of the heart flow the issues of life. We are the heartland. God is doing something in red Kansas. And I believe that that's why there's such spiritual warfare over that vote, spiritual warfare over our state house. Just a fun little thing. If you're a believer, which I know you are, you'll appreciate this. There was the Great Revival in 1901. They called it the Great Awakening. And it's actually, it started in Topeka, Kansas. And it was a Bible school. And they broke out speaking in tongues for a couple of days, and the papers wrote stories about him, and they ran out of town because it was nuts, right? They stopped the flow of what Holy Spirit wanted to do in the state of Kansas to radically transform that region. And instead, those folks then migrated to Texas, and then from Texas, it ended up starting the Azusa Revival out in California.
Oh, wow. Okay.
But that started in Topeka. And so, I look at the Masonic Lodge right across from the State House, and I know the warfare, and I know the spiritual. The bottom line is this is a spiritual war, and I don't think God's done with Kansas. I don't think he's done with what he wants me to do in Kansas. Maybe it's a legislator, maybe it's not. But I tell you what, I'm probably more fired up than ever to light a few fires across our country and have nights of liberty. Like, we have got to rally the people, and they are ready. There's a lot of people that have been asleep, but I tell you, a lot of people are they are mad, and they want their country back. And I believe that the Lord is going to honor the hearts of the remnant. I just do. I can't be without hope to know, hey, it's over. We're done.
Yeah. I mean, I think many of us feel the same way. And I think, I talked to somebody who's an expert on eschatology recently, and they were saying that, because I said, as an expert in eschatology, I mean, do you see any evidence for like what America's role is in the end times? And I thought this was actually really interesting. He went through kind of the prophecies in the book of Daniel, where Daniel saw a vision of these creatures, and one of the creatures was a lion with eagle's wings, but the eagle's wings, I need to go back and reread it. I'm just giving you his description of it, came off of the lion, so separated from the lion, which, the lion, some scholars think represents Great Britain, which America came from, and the eagle's wing is obviously America, so America would separate from Great Britain. And then in the book of Revelation, you actually see eagle's wings, I think, surround Israel. And so some eschatological scholars think that America's role in the end times is to protect Israel. And so I think that God, I do agree that we're not done. I think that there is going to be a great awakening and a revival. And so, I completely share that sentiment.
Yeah. I do think that we need to buckle up, though, and make sure you're preparing with food and raising gardens and getting ready to butcher
Yes.
chickens. And, you know, I mean, we can't be idiots. Like, I think there's some wisdom that we need to have. I don't think that we will just, you know, that believers will be unscathed in some of the things that are to come. But I do believe, you know, it's crazy. I never thought I'd be scrambling to live, to try to figure out how to live like my great grandparents, right? Canning,
I know.
you know,
Isn't that
some of
crazy?
these things.
Yeah.
But I'm so thankful for people like you and Amy who are, you are standing at the gate. And I just believe that the Lord is going to honor that. I believe that the Lord is going to honor your faithfulness to some days really just to stand. I mean, that's kind of where I'm at right now, is like, I'm not even sure if I'm doing all the things right, really. You know, I just am like, Lord, I'm just going to stand, because really that's all we can, just stand in truth and stand in righteousness. And when they come and they try to smash us down, we just have to continue to stand. And I don't know, I have a peace in my spirit that you know, the Lord wants to do things on the earth. I think signs, wonders, and miracles. You know, when I walk in the Capitol, I pray, Father God, if they're sick, heal them. You know, like, that's the sort of faith I want to be walking in this end time. And you know, the government is on the Lord's shoulders. I mean, this is His idea, and He's fighting for us, even in the midst of the chaos of it all. The Lord is fighting for us. It's all for His glory.
That's so, I love that. Thank you so much. That's so encouraging. And I know a lot of people love to hear that. And I completely agree that is what's happening. And that, you know, I actually had the thought the other day. I was thinking about how they're weaponizing the police state against us and everything. And, like, you know, just what it would be like to be one of those people in the DC gulag, or, you know, to get rounded up by the feds, you know, because they're obviously going to start targeting us more and more. Which I think is why they hired all these IRS agents, you know, as another excuse to come lock us up and take our property. But I'm just like, you know, we're like, even if you're in prison, like, they're the ones that are actually in prison, because we are free. You know, we are free because God has set us free. You know, He's given us joy, you know, that cannot be taken away by any man. You know, I mean, the Bible says, don't fear what they can do to your body, you know, fear those who can, you know, take your, harm your soul, which they can't, you know. And so we are free. God has set us free. And, you know, nobody can take that away from us. Even if we're actually, like, physically bound, we are spiritually free. So, I mean, just amazing what you've been doing, the fight you've been fighting, you know. That's why I wanted to have you on, because, you know, it's a very just inspiring story of somebody who just was a regular citizen, just like the rest of us, was not part of this political class, and took it upon yourself to take a stand. And you know, I'd love to hear more of your story. I wish we had more time, but this was just so encouraging. And you know, keep fighting the good fight. And I guess I'll just leave you with the last word. I mean, you gave a pretty good one, but, you know, tell people where they can find you, and, you know, how they can support you.
Well, I appreciate that. So Facebook and Telegram are good places. You know, they haven't kicked me off Facebook yet, so I'm still, I get a lot, you know, I'm going to shoot fire. I'm going to use all the things until I can't. And Facebook moves my message along really well. So that's Tatum for Kansas. My email is tatumforkansas@gmail.com. I know that we are still trying to raise money for that Value Them Both amendment. There was a gal who I just heard today had donated, I think it was $100,000, with the expectation that money in the next few days will be able to be returned to her. And so there's a Give, Send, Go. This doesn't go to me. This goes to a Give, Send, Go account which will help pay the bond for that value them both abortion amendment recount. And so I would ask people, please help with that. We need to put our money where our morality is. And I will be this next weekend in Springfield, Missouri, Mike Lindell's Moment of Truth. I'm very excited to be going to that, to meet with other lawmakers across the country. And to be able to, he endorsed me in my race, which was really just such an honor because, again, I'm just a small town gal, but it's a blessing when patriots stand together, especially believers. That's what makes me so excited, is that the Lord is using the remnant of believers and gathering up, for such a time as this to do something special on the earth. And so Lance Wall now will be there on this next weekend, which I just love Lance so much. And yeah, I appreciate your time, and I appreciate everything that you guys are doing. I'm not sure what the Lord has for us to do here in the next few months, but it's gonna be good. I do believe that there is a shaking. Chuck Pierce just a couple weeks ago prophesied, he and Dutch Sheets before the Kansas election, that the next 8 months, I'll send this to you all and you guys can post it somewhere because it's a dream he'd had in 2019. And he talks about how the next 8 months in Kansas, or the next 8 months in general, are going to be hard. And so, I'm real careful who I allow to speak into my life. I just don't listen to every Tom, Dick, or Harry that's out there that says that they have a prophetic word. But I do listen to men of God that the Lord has continued to prove the things that they've said, and they have a track record. And I do believe the Lord is still, speaking through men on the earth. And so it might get hairy here in the next few months. I have other reps saying that we may not even have our elections in November. Maybe.
I know. I think a lot of people are thinking that. They're going to try to stop him, I think. Yeah, monkeypox or something. Some excuse. Yeah.
But there's just no excuse, is there? A friend of mine, and I'll leave you with this. He's another state rep, and he, about a year ago, told me a story of the 56 signers. He's also a pastor. I should say this. And a wonderful storyteller. And he goes, "Hey, Tatum, have you ever wondered why there were not 57 signers?" I said, "Well, no, I sure haven't ever wondered that." And he said, "How many men and women were asked to show up that day, but didn't have the courage to sign their lives, their sacred fortunes, and their honor because they knew they would probably lose all three? How many people didn't have the courage to show up that day, but were invited to? Do we have the courage in this day to be the 57 signer?" And I think that's a real powerful paradigm as to what's probably going to come, what's at stake. Do we have the courage in the face of all of the persecution that could be coming down the pike, especially for Christians? Do we have the courage of the 57th signer to say, "You know what, Lord, whatever it takes, it's all for your glory, and we will stand regardless"? And that's just where I'm at, is that I will be standing regardless.
Wow, that's amazing. Well, I don't even want to ruin that because that was so good. We'll just end the show on that note. But thank you so much for coming on. And if you want to stick around for a minute backstage just to debrief, you can, or if you need to jet, you can. But I'll go ahead and end the broadcast. I just want to thank everybody for watching tonight, and we'll be back next week with the Patriot Barbie. It's going to be, actually, I'm going to call the episode Barbie Girls Living in a Commie World, because we have the Patriot Barbie. I think we're getting conservative Barbie on too, both hairdressers who had their businesses threatened by the government and have done a lot to fight back. And I think it'll be a very entertaining episode. So we'll see you all back next week.
You've been listening to Paul Davis Uncanceled. We're sick and tired of government tyranny, meta tyranny, social media tyranny, and we're here to fight with and for patriots against it. We hope you've enjoyed the show. Make sure to like, rate, and review. And we'll be back soon. In the meantime, for more, hit the website at www.fireduptxlawyer.com. See you next time, Patriots.